the Western Empire has sustained a strategic defeat in the Middle East, in Western Asia, and that I think that this was apparent at the very least since June this year, since the 12-day war, and America's inability to defeat Houthis in Yemen. So I think that the peace that was just signed between Israel and Hamas actually makes that undeniable. It cements it, because I really see this peace as Trump basically cemented Israel's defeat.
That's not just a military loss, it's a psychological one. For decades, the West assumed force could shape outcomes, but Yemen and Gaza proved otherwise. Power projection met its limits, and the world noticed.
Some might say that he's protecting them from themselves, maybe, but it's becoming undeniable now. And in a way, you could even argue that he handed a victory to Hamas, because Hamas already won, but now it's in black and white. And so I think that the Western Empire sustained a strategic defeat, and now if you sail your tankers under your own flag, and they get attacked or they get confiscated, as the British and the Americans have done in the past, well, then there's no question about whose property you're stealing, and it puts the cards down on the table. So it's almost like daring them. Here it is. It's almost a glove thrown in their faces. These are our ships carrying our oil exports. I dare you to do something about it.
What's happening here isn't just about ships or oil, it's symbolism. When you start sailing tankers under your own flag knowing they could be seized, you're no longer projecting strength, you're testing limits. It's a public gamble, almost a dare. Go ahead, touch it. And that tells you how far confidence has fallen, because real power doesn't need to prove itself, it just acts. What we're seeing now is desperation dressed up as defiance.
For a very long time now, I've been kind of finding the hand of the British establishment in every crisis theater everywhere around the world. They're always there, and they're there in a very quiet and discreet way. You don't find British military. You don't find necessarily many known British government officials, but you do find a lot of these intelligence assets, NGOs, charities, the British Council, private companies, and so forth. And they're always there. And it seems to me that Trump took them by surprise with this peace deal. That they didn't see it coming, they didn't expect it, and it caught them off guard. Because let's go back 100 years. The British Empire created the Zionist project, and then they moved a lot of pieces into place. It was a very long-term, complex game to create the State of Israel.
Alex Craner's point echoes history. Ever since the 1917 Balfour Declaration, Britain's influence in the Middle East has thrived in the shadows through diplomacy, intelligence, and proxies instead of armies. Trump's peace deal didn't just surprise them, it briefly exposed how those old imperial networks still shape modern geopolitics.
And they did it. They created the State of Israel, and they created it for a reason. And that reason wasn't to provide a homeland for the long-suffering Jewish people. It was a cynical play for the ends of the British Empire. And the alumni of the Alfred Milner's Round Table articulated what the reason was. They said basically, if Britain is going to remain as a maritime empire, it needs to seed this region with a particularly patriotic stock, and they weren't able to do this with the Arabs, so they decided to bring Jews there and then to create the Jewish state of Israel. And the whole objective of the Jewish state of Israel there was to keep the whole region destabilized, perpetually at war, because it's a strategically important region. And rather than attempting to control it militarily, which you couldn't even theoretically, nobody has that many troops and police, you just keep the region in a state of chaos perpetually, because that makes it easier to play one tribe, one country, one region against the other.
What Alex Craner is pointing out ties straight back to the logic of empire control through chaos. The British didn't need to occupy the Middle East forever, they just needed it unstable enough to manage from afar. It's the same formula used in India's partition, and later in Iraq: divide, inflame, then arbitrate from a distance. A region in conflict becomes predictable, and predictability is power.
While you secretly deal with everybody. It's the typical balance of powers, British geopolitics. Now, you're involved, everybody knows you're involved, and now you have to explain, why is this region perpetually at war? And then the narrative is always like, oh, it's so complicated, centuries of hatreds, very primitive, irrational people. You can't negotiate with them. They're always at each other's throats. And like, what can we do? It's just like that, and we're trying to do our best, but you see, these people are beyond hope. And then Trump comes in, and after 10 months of his presidency, he gets everybody around the table, and he gets them to sign a peace agreement. And so now this is a big blow for British diplomacy.
Alex Craner exposes the oldest trick in British geopolitics: create chaos, then act like you're managing it. For decades, the Middle East was portrayed as too complex for peace, a region cursed by ancient hatred. That narrative kept outsiders in control. Then Trump broke the script. In less than a year, he did what generations of diplomats claimed was impossible, proving the conflict was never about culture, it was about control.
Because what is so complicated about peace that they could not figure out, that Trump did figure out? Trump, the guy that everybody loves to hate, he figured it out. So the day after Trump announced the peace on the 10th October, what was the Sunday? Sunday was the 12th, right? Yeah, 2 days after. British Secretary of Education comes on Sky News for an interview, and she says, we shaped this peace behind the scenes because it's the right thing to do and it's in our interest and blah, 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 blah. And then the interviewer asked her, like, okay, so you did all this stuff behind the scenes, like what? And then she couldn't explain. She couldn't, then she sounds like a high school student who's doing a book report about a book that they never read. He's just like, well, it's very complicated, and but good on the Americans that they contributed to. So they're trying to take credit because it's massively embarrassing. It puts them in under very bad light. And then, Trump even had them all fly to Egypt, where, he put them through another very light, very subtle humiliation ritual, especially Keir Starmer, to make it very obvious who did make the peace happen and who is just a bystander and observer.
This moment perfectly captures the shock to the old order. For decades, London's diplomats thrived in the shadows, pulling strings, shaping narratives, claiming quiet credit. Then along comes Trump, a man dismissed as reckless, who achieves in months what their entire apparatus couldn't. The scramble to rewrite the story, to pretend Britain was involved behind the scenes, only made the embarrassment worse. It was empire pride colliding with modern reality, and the mask slipped.
How can we, interpret the situation in the Middle East? Is the new war coming, or we can say that the war has made some sort of deterrent for Iran?
Well, it's that would be very difficult to predict, Nima, especially because pretty much everybody knows that you cannot trust the Israelis for anything. They can even put their signatures on some agreement, and then if it suits them to break it tomorrow, they will break it. Now, I think that one thing that Trump has done with this peace, and I think that was probably the most complicated part of it, was that he provided a kind of insurance policy for Netanyahu. So I think that almost an hour or two after you and I last spoke, I read the news that Yair Lapid, leader of Israeli opposition, committed that he would protect Benjamin Netanyahu if there were any votes in the Knesset against him. So, that takes pressure off of Benjamin Netanyahu, because the reason why he was keeping Israel at war was because he himself was finished. If the war finished, his political life would end, and he would most probably end up in prison. And so, and basically he's the Lord of life and death in Israel and over IDF. He's in charge, literally. And so if you remove that danger from him, then he no longer has that pressure to keep Israel constantly at war. And I think this is also the reason why Trump is now pressuring Herzog, the president of Israel, to give a pardon to Benjamin Netanyahu, because then Benjamin Netanyahu is in the clear. He no longer needs war. And, obviously, every one of us would like to see Benjamin Netanyahu in court and in prison. But if that means that 100 Palestinians have to get killed every day, then I'd rather Benjamin Netanyahu be in the clear. And so I think that the risk of Israel starting a war against Iran again has gone down a lot. I do believe that Trump also told them, you go to war against Iran, you're on your own. I mean, he's already said this, but I think this is also part of this deal. So the illusion of the illusion of the Israelis, we're going to start the war, and then the Americans will have no choice. They're going to have to come in and fight it for us. I think that fell away. I think that probably Benjamin Netanyahu's perspective has changed a lot with this peace deal, and I think that the dealing between him and Trump was, okay, you stop bombing Gaza, you stop with attacks on Iran, and I'll make sure that you're okay. And so as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is there in power, then the deal has a chance to stick. If Benjamin Netanyahu is overthrown and something bad happens to him, then who knows? I don't know. It's going to be Ben-Gvir next or Smotrich, and then you're back to square one. But I think that for the time being, let's say that the detonator has been removed from this explosive mix, and this could all change tomorrow. But I think that this peace actually it seems to me that it has a chance of being sustained.
What Alex Craner lays out here is a reminder that peace in the Middle East is rarely about treaties, it's about leverage. Trump didn't solve the region's conflicts, he temporarily removed the fuse by giving Netanyahu something to lose if war resumed. In a sense, he traded political survival for regional stability, and for the first time in years, that gamble worked, but The foundation is brittle. It depends on individuals, not institutions, on political convenience, not reconciliation. History shows how short-lived such arrangements can be. The real question isn't whether this peace will hold, but whether any peace